Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's ISM New Jersey webinar on Human Resource Category Strategy. Today's speaker is Dana Lucas. Just a couple of housekeeping. We will be sending out your Continuing Education Hour Achievement Award at the conclusion of this seminar, and then we will also send you a copy of the recording of this as well. So to here, I give our speaker, Dan.
Thank you, Kathy. So today we're going to be talking about human resources from a category strategy standpoint, basically from procurement. So if you're an indirect procurement leader, professional, and human resources is one of your categories to manage on a regional/global basis, this could act as a guide in putting together what your strategy should be between you and the business, and hopefully it's based on collaboration with the business. So it's something that you can have documented as kind of a roadmap for a couple of years to try to follow. So from a planning strategy standpoint. So just kind of give you a little bit about myself. Been in supply chain for about 20 years. Worked for mostly Fortune 500 companies my whole career. Been lucky enough to do different aspects of supply chain, from fulfillment, operations, warehousing, production, procurement. Just kind of ran the gambit a little bit on that, so I was able to touch just about every aspect of it along the way. Also had my MBA in international business and finishing up my doctoral dissertation for my doctorate in global supply chain as well. I've been doing this with Kathy as far as continuing education, and I'm also a CPSM certified trainer. Been doing that for quite a few years, about 4 or 5 years, through ISM and through Kathy as well. Have my Lean Six Sigma certification and strategic sourcing certification as well. So that was just a little bit about myself. We'll jump into the next slide. So when you're talking about what to put together, there's different stages of what you should do from a global procurement strategy standpoint. This kind of follows a 7-step methodology, which we'll get into in a minute. Most people, I'm sure, know if you're in procurement, it's pretty standard best practice. So it's something that you should basically have as a backbone for what you're doing. So one of the things to basically keep in mind there is that the different phases are as is, external, strategy, and implementation. So the as is when you're basically doing an evaluation of what you want to do from a supplier standpoint, product standpoint. The external is taking looks at the supply base and making sure that you take a look at the market, what are the best practices, and most importantly too, what are the trends, right? What's going on out there. The 3-year strategy plan is what are you going to do each of those years from a main strategy standpoint as far as planning. What are the key milestones and activities that you want to focus on during that time frame. And implementation is basically, once you have those activities locked down, is how you're going to roll it out from a regional global standpoint, right? What's that implementation plan going to look like? So moving on to the next slide, talking about that 7-step methodology. You're basically profiling the category, so identifying the category as far as the components of the category, which we'll get into later, the different suppliers, the spend, taking a look at that from an analytical standpoint, and then develop the sourcing strategy. Do you want to do an RFP, an RFI? Is it an auction? Is it just single source supplier negotiations? Is it getting rid of tail spend, where you've got spend with certain suppliers they're maybe only using once a year for $1,000 at a clip, that you want to eliminate and consolidate with larger spend suppliers, right? Then you're going to generate that portfolio of who are the preferred suppliers of 3 to 5 that you want to go with to do an RFP, RFI. And then you're going to select the implementation path. You're going to source and negotiate, right? At that point, you're going to end up with what you want to do as far as, are we going to go with multiple suppliers, one supplier? Then you're going to start negotiating with those suppliers to make sure you get the best price to move on to the next phase, which is finalizing those results and awards. So now you've got a supplier that you want to go with per a scoring matrix you put together internally, which will weigh pricing, capabilities, services, whatever it is, expertise. And at that point, now you can start implementation. You execute the contract on both sides, pricing's finalized, and you sign the agreement. And then it doesn't really stop there, because you're going through continuous improvement. You're bringing best practices back to the business on what's going on in the marketplace, so they can see, okay, is this still the right supplier we should be working with? Are there other suppliers out there that can give us more benefit than we have today? If there's issues with the supplier that you implemented, this also comes into play, where now procurement sourcing will help basically put together a get well plan, an action plan. What are the issues you're having, and how do you focus on those issues in order to put corrective action in place and get the supplier back on track? And if you can't do that, and it's usually a 6-month plan to do that, then at that point you would want to go back out to market and find a different supplier. The next slide talks about executive summary. So you want to have this up front, right, when you're putting this category strategy together. And first and foremost, it's that 7-step process, which we know you have to use up front. So that's the roadmap, right? So you have that up front that, hey, we're going to implement this process as we're going through the analysis and review of the portfolio. And then you need to know who's on your team. It's not just procurement. Is it finance? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Who are the key stakeholders involved? And then for each project, you want to put together a separate project charter, right? And that charter is going to talk about key deliverables, key milestones. What's the objective of what you're trying to do? What's the success criteria? What are the risks, right? What's the timeline look like as far as the project plan in a concise view, right? So you can even look up the words project charter online, and you'll find different templates out there. But you want to have a charter that talks about also who are the key players, who's the steering committee, right? That basically you can have from a kickoff meeting standpoint of the project to make sure everybody's on board with the objectives and what their roles and responsibilities are and what you're trying to do. Take a look at what's going on with your contracts. What contracts do you have in place? There are contracts you can't get out of, that they're locking down spend for a couple of years, or some of them exclusive, right? Understand what your current situation is from an obligation standpoint, from a spend standpoint. And then basically it's realizing savings and compliance after structuring communications, right? It's really saying we as a company should realize savings, building in controls, and have the negotiations we need. Are we looking to bring a consultant in? That consultant can help us potentially negotiate the contract with the supplier we're going to go with, right? They might play a part in that. Or they might be someone that actually participates in the bid and could be someone that outsources the service to one of their suppliers to satisfy the RFP. Right? But either way, you want to make sure you've got consortia or consultancy management in there to help with the process. Because from a due diligence standpoint, not everyone's an expert in HR, right? And even though you might have the business weigh in, to have a consultant where they've got specialists that have been doing this for 20 or 30 years, weigh in on what the requirements might be for the RFP, what KPI should be in the contract. That's very important, because even from an audit standpoint, you can say with the utmost confidence that we brought the industry expert in to help us with that. Is it center-led? Basically, I used an automobile as far as fleet as an example, and we'll look at some other examples later. But, is it something that needs to be global, right? Where it's coming in from a global provider that cascades down to the regions, and all the reporting is going to be consolidated in a portal and everything's funneling up to a parent company. Is that the way to go, right? Do you have the right policies in place? If you're looking at fleet, which is to this point, are the right policies there, right? Are they in place? Are they updated on, say, for fleet, for example, what level person should have a car in what country? In the United States, for a lot of companies, it's stricter. They might not give a company car unless you're a VP or an executive VP, from my experiences. As you get into different countries, it could be different. For instance, with Europe, you could be a manager or a low-level manager and still get a car, right? So are those the right policies in place, and are they updated with best practices? Building a comprehensive program with longevity, right? You want to have a program that is sustainable and repeatable, that is good for 3 to 5 years, where you don't have to do too many adjustments. And then the communication of awareness, right? Communicate what you get out of the reporting. If there's reporting that's global, is it distributed to a core team, right? Do the right people have access to the reporting on the portal? Are the reports the right format that people want to see, right? So make sure the communication flow is there as well from reporting. Next slide is, you want to make sure that you could take a look at the entire landscape. Here's a snapshot of typical indirect categories within most companies. You could see HR in there, right? But what part of the pie, what part of the puzzle is HR compared to the different categories, right? If your spend's $200 million, is it 50? Is it 25? What kind of impact does HR have overall from a savings standpoint? Whereas you're tackling that category, you could have the right goals in place compared to others, right? So you need to know kind of where you stand as opposed to other categories and the spend and the kind of effort and resources it might take. So this is important. So kind of just going through the agenda we're trying to work on today, we talked about the as-is, and we're going to get into that category vision and mission, but this gives you kind of a landscape. Like I said, the mission, you want to have a mission statement, right? Basically, and it has to be something that is something that you think is achievable, right? We ensure procurement policy practices are adhered to, procuring cost-effective, compliant, sustainable HR services in a timely manner. So how are you going to, what are you trying to do, right? It's the what. It's the what's the purpose of what you're trying to do, or the vision is kind of how are you going to get there? Well, we're going to be an integrated business partner, human resources, by aligning with their stakeholders in supplier management, innovation, best practices, right? This tells you the how. How are you going to do it? And the mission is more about the what, right? What you're trying to do, the objective. Taking a look at a stakeholder map and need, you want to have something like this out there. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but basically, you want to have an 80-20 breakout, right, of the categories. So, and this is a good snapshot to have for the stakeholders. What are the different subcategories? What's the different spend within the categories? You want to populate a sheet such as this and put in the different suppliers. You've got, 20% of the suppliers with 80% of the spend, right? So where are those buckets? Where's that low-hanging fruit? You want to have this grid populated with that. So when you're talking to the stakeholders, you're talking to finance, you've got, hey, this is what we want to focus on. Are these the right suppliers in place? Can we, like I said, bring up some of the lower spend suppliers into some of these buckets, right? So this is a great map to have as a snapshot from a spend standpoint. You don't want to have a report that's going to show millions of line items. You want something that's quick and easy and people can kind of see where the majority of the spend is. Supplier cost assessment. You basically want to take a look, and we kind of go back to the fleet model, right? As far as the cost structure, what's going on within that category? What are the different subcategories or components that make up that subcategory, actually, because that's what fleet is for HR, right? What are the different pieces to focus on that are cost drivers within that model. Just a couple of points on the bottom. In Europe, the cost structure for leasing and fleet management assumes a supplier pays for fuel, tolls, fines, and insurance, and the widely accepted model, right? So in different countries, that doesn't apply. And they also pay taxes on the cars as well in Europe, which isn't mentioned here, but they do. And other countries don't do that as well, right? So this is something that's interesting because, again, there's differences between how different regions handle it. Taking a look up top, the cost of capital, finance, and maintenance together contribute to 60% of the supplier's costs, right? So you're thinking to yourself, wow, the supplier's really not making a lot of margin off of this, right, as far as the cost model goes for themselves. But this kind of gives you an idea, right, of what's going on in that subcategory. From a supplier cost structure model, this tells you where they're going to make their profit, right? This is where they're going to make their profit margins on these major buckets, from maintenance to fuel to insurance. You know, even when you return a car from a rental, from fuel, you're paying a pretty huge markup if you don't gas it up yourself, right? These are ways that companies, you know, will make money off of certain types of line items with this, especially with the insurance. You have to buy certain types of insurance for extra protection. It's going to be an on-cost. So these are the ones that are driving, you know, as far as that subcategory, the cost drivers on that. Moving on to another popular subcategory is temp labor, right? So when you're talking about temp labor, you know, it's really the base rates with staffing agencies, but even to take that a step further, it's having a rate card, right? So you really want to have a rate card for certain regions where, hey, these are the preferred suppliers that we want to work with, and here are the different rates for different types of job functions within that. And I've been through a couple of those exercises. And it's something where you want to be able to give the users choice, because a lot of the times the temp labor agencies, some are more proficient than others in certain types of areas. Certain are more proficient in light industrial, some in office workers. So it's not a perfect science with each one. So if you have a couple they can choose from a menu type approach with the right rates that they can pick from, it's much more beneficial that way. Because to find one that really does it all proficiently, I found in years of looking at this, it can be kind of challenging. So, and also different regions have different ideas of who they should be using as well. Allow staffing agencies to submit targets for base wage rates by category, you know, basically going through that RFP process, right? You're doing it from a regional global level, but you're basically trying to get in those bids and kind of qualify or pre-qualify those suppliers to be part of that rate card where you can. Basically, how are you going to dictate, you know, who the most proficient suppliers should be? Is it going to be through, you know, obviously pricing, but it's capabilities, right? It's regional reach. It's different countries they have support in that they don't, right? Like what's their global footprint, right? So those are the types of things to look at. Next slide talks about relocation, right? Which is this very sensitive topic with a lot of companies when it comes to expats and relocating to different countries with your family. You know, basically, and it's a very strong subcategory within HR. There's usually a lot of spend there as far as all the different pieces you can see here that go into that overall spend. It even could be down to spousal career assistance, right? It's an agency that they pay for assistance there. Real estate, from home purchases and home finding, you know, obviously the move. What are the tax implications? What about temporary living? You know, they usually put employees up for anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks in temporary housing at an escalated rate that the company usually absorbs, right? That costs money as well. And there's usually food stipends and spending money stipends that go into that for that period of time. I've been through that a couple times firsthand, so I know. But that's something that these are the different components that make up that relocation subcategory, which I said is actually one of the more important ones in HR and could be one of the bigger spend ones as well. Some of those cost components, administrative, logistics, technology, material, You know, there's some future trends, impact on the buyer, right? You could take a look at the labor rates. That's solid on both, as expected. Logistics for future trend, basically half and half on the buyer. You know, it's something that's impactful, but from a future trends point, there's not going to be too many changes there, right? So this kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. And you take a look at the bottom when it comes to savings, right? Where can you save money? What's got the biggest impact on costs, right? The mobility portfolio, right? Taking a look at everything you're doing under mobility as far as the total spend, right? That's obviously going to give you the most savings potential with the total cost in there, as opposed to the breakout, right? So this gives you an idea. Training is another subcategory I wanted to talk about, which is also very popular. A lot of companies obviously are doing their training online now. There's a lot of stuff going on in there, even with artificial intelligence, where companies are looking at having it more as a two-way training back and forth, where you can ask questions and somebody responds to you as well. There's a lot of stuff going on in this subcategory, which I'm actually pretty entrenched in myself. The interesting thing about it is obviously mobile now is a trend where companies want to put training on the phones as much as possible. You can do it on the go, especially a lot of people that travel. They have learning universities now with companies where you're taking different modules of training as part of a university, where you get, you know, actually some sort of degree even through your company on training. So they've definitely found ways to make it interesting, and it's definitely evolving. And at the end of the day, the company uses this training for a lot of different reasons. They can use it to basically make sure, from a compliance standpoint, that everybody's educated or exposed to different policies that they have, from code of conduct to any kind of morality clauses, anything that the company is exposed to, privacy, bank, you know, anything like that, from data, internet usage, whatever it may be, to protect the company. Whereas if they end up getting sued one day, they could say, well, we provided this data and this information to these people, and they were aware of what they should or shouldn't be doing, right? So from a due diligence standpoint, it's important that they do that. Also, from a development standpoint, from training and succession planning and moving up in the company, there's different modules you could take. It could be an Excel training, it could be negotiation training, whatever it may be. But to be able to check that box and have that, add that to your skill set, is only going to help that person in his or her job, right? So it's definitely become something that's more at the forefront now in HR review. Taking a look at this grid, the content delivery is kind of what I was really gravitating towards, which is basically those are the costs that vary in respect to the delivery methods. The classroom training is kind of a thing of the past now. It's really, like I said, the virtual instructor-led or web-based solution, which is really where it's at, which tracks your progress on how many modules you've taken and what's left to take. It gives you a date usually to take them by, and if you don't take them by that date, you could get, you know, a red flag on your performance review for not doing that, which could affect your bonus, possibly a raise. So it's actually gotten to that level in companies now where they're actually tracking it and making you accountable for it on a review standpoint. That's just a little bit about that. Taking a look at the cost analysis, as far as vendor management, you can see the different percentages and where the training cost really lies. And the scheduling on the 10 to 15%, right, is the one that jumps off the page, right? Learning and development administration, learning delivery internal, and learning delivery third-party costs, right? So obviously going out to those suppliers, paying for those services, right? The integration into your internal portals, right? Hiring the suppliers to provide the content even, right? And, you know, the customer support for that. That's obviously where your spend is, right? So that's going to be where you're going to get the biggest savings impact. From a percentage standpoint, as far as transformation goes, you could also see, you know, the bigger one down below too. A lot of them are 10 to, a couple are 10 to 20, but your make versus buy, right, on your 15 to 20%. So what's something that you can do internally, right, and stuff you have to outsource, right? Having those decisions made can basically maybe not as much save, but avoid costs as well with spending with suppliers. Taking a look at today's buying process, understand what you're doing today as a company. What's your structure? Is it global? Is it regional? Is it a hybrid? And is it a combination of both global and regional on how you purchase for the business? Does it reside out of a corporate headquarters, right? Do you have a corporate headquarters in one location and satellite offices in different regions? And the strategies and the plannings cascade from the corporate headquarters level to the different regional site locations? Is that how it works? Do regional projects go through regional contacts for procurement? Is it strictly kept at that local level, or does it escalate up, right? You need to define what the process is today, again, as part of that current situation. Talking about category review, understand who your procurement team is, right? Making sure you're identifying who the proper contacts are in each country, right? Some contacts are split between direct and indirect. Some have different categories within direct or indirect. Make sure you have the right contacts on that project charter and in this document on who's supporting HR in which country, right? So you can communicate that properly to the business and the steering committee. What are the regions that you're responsible for, right? These are the 4 major regions of the globe, right? Is it all these regions? Do you not have representation in LATAM? Does that need to come off, right? Make sure, again, as part of the current situation, what are the regions that your spend is supporting and impacting? The global procurement team, right? From a global procurement standpoint, if it's regional/global, who are the regional people report up to, right? And what are those global people responsible for? Usually those global people are responsible for categories on a global level. Now, a global level can mean just more than one region, right? Anything that's more than one region is considered global. It doesn't have to be all, it could just be more than one, right? So from that standpoint, who are the right contacts for that, and what categories do those global people support? You know, most global contacts support a multitude of categories from anywhere from, say, 3 to 6, right? But who are those people and what are their responsibilities? So you want to have this documented here and also in the project charter as well. Talking about fleet a little bit more, one of the parts I wanted to talk about here was you could take a look at the expected growth rate, right? 2.5% to reach 85 million units in 2017, and car sales in 2016 were close to this many units. So understanding that category overview now, like we just talked about, on a subcategory level. So go into each subcategory and understand, hey, what's going on as far as the overall look of the market? What's the volume in units? What's the volume in spend? Where is that spend regionally for each region as far as units and percentage and dollars, right? Understand that so that you know, again, okay, here's where our impact is, or here's an area we need to focus on. Here's an area where there's really nothing going on, right? And there's not going to be. So you need to make sure you can understand where your focus areas are going to be from here. Same thing with relocation, right? Going through the same process. Market was valued at $28 billion in 2016. It's projected at a growth of $30 billion by 2018, right? So this tells you the different countries that are driving that market and where it is, right? This gives you an understanding from a maturity level standpoint on what's going on, right? Same thing with training, right? Kind of following the same model for all. Now, getting into that category maturity piece, we're going to dive a little bit deeper. Now, you basically want to take a look at the different regions, right, and understand, hey, who are the key suppliers out there, right? And just taking a look out in the market, and anybody, this is public information, anybody could see this. These are a lot of the global suppliers right here, right? These are the ones that are kind of driving this subcategory from a volume standpoint, from a representation standpoint, right? These are the big ones. Then there's local suppliers, right, that are supporting on a regional country site basis, right? So make sure that you understand who are the big players out there. Are we working with some of them? You know, sometimes the big players won't work with you if you don't have the volume, right? They only work with companies that have a certain amount of cars. If you fall below that, you might, as much as you want to go global, and work with some of these big suppliers, you might not be able to because they might not be interested. So you might have to work on a regional, local level, depending on what kind of volume you have, right? And it could be in the reverse fashion, where you've got a lot of spend and you want to go global, but then you're not paying attention to the country needs. And a good example of that is, it's a sensitive topic. So some people in certain countries are used to driving a certain type of car from a model brand standpoint. They've been driving the same car for 5 or 10 years. And now all of a sudden you're saying, wait a minute, that car is not available with this new company. You're going to be limited to these models. So now you've got someone complaining, someone questioning the process, and it gets escalated. People question why we chose that supplier. Even though it's price sensitive, you weren't considerate of the options and who's currently using what model. So there's other factors that aren't the most measurable that you have to keep in mind when taking a look at this. Taking a look at the same thing from relocation, right? What's the maturity model, right? What different regions are the most mature from a category development standpoint? And from a low standpoint, which aren't, right? And are they looking to have a presence or not, right? What's the future look like for them, right? So when you take a look at that, this kind of continues a little bit more, and this gives you those key suppliers again, right, which is all public, right? These are the suppliers that work on a global basis with multinational companies. Now, when it comes to relocation, having that global breadth is very important. Because as you're moving people from country to country, different sensitivity levels, different cultures, the companies out there with the biggest track record and who are stronger in where you're doing the most amount of relocation from a common sense standpoint, right? That they're gonna resonate the most. Training, right? We talked about training before, where the high maturity companies again, where the low ones from a country standpoint, and where are they looking to go? When you take a look at upcoming engagement strategies, right? You see, for instance, with the medium maturity countries, such as India, South Korea, they're just doing single source providing, right? They're basically just renegotiating what they have, right? Now, you take a look at the high maturity ones, your managed training service providers, right? So you're managing, maybe you're doing RFPs at this standpoint, right? So it depends on the maturity level of the region and the country as to what type of strategy you're going to have in place. That makes sense. From the training standpoint, again, here are some of the companies that are out there, right? Taking a look at those. So I want to take a look at the category strategic mapping. This is actually called a Krychek model, the Peter Krychek model. And basically what it is taking your category and plotting where you want to have focus. And this is something that is a great graph to show your business on, hey, this is how we envision these different subcategories from a focus standpoint and a strategic mapping standpoint. Do you agree? Do we agree on where these subcategories should lie? Take a look at fleet management, right? From a strategic standpoint, we know it's falling in that box, right? It's something that has a lot of supply risk, but it's something that could have a lot of impact, right? We talked about the supply risk on the sensitivity level and planning, and that kind of brings it to the forefront, especially from an executive standpoint. You want to reduce the noise. From a profitability standpoint, it's a pretty large spend, right? So you know that it's going to have that impact on profit or savings. And changing sources of supply is very difficult. Like I said, if you've got a supplier you've been using for a lot of years, to make that change is emotional, right? And could cause a lot of disruption to the business. You don't have a lot of adequate suppliers out there. There might not be a lot that support this category, right? So you have to be mindful of that. You might, sometimes if it's not broken, you shouldn't fix it by changing suppliers. You might be fine with who you're with, right? So you don't want to try to put the square peg in the round hole if you don't need to. Got to make sense. So that's kind of an example, right? And you can see how the other ones are plotted as well. But this is something you want to do from a strategic standpoint and from a communication standpoint to the business. Your supplier's portfolio assessment, right? blank does not have enough spend with large companies. Your company's name, right, does not have enough spend with larger companies to negotiate effectively, right? So if that's one of the issues where you don't have the volume, you're not, the biggest player in the room, what are you going to do, right? That's where maybe consultants can help. Going to a big company that has the leverage, the consortia, that has the leverage with the suppliers, that has the spend, that can actually bring you into their portfolio, and you can leverage their price breaks that they have. That might be the way to go if you don't have that level of spend. We're going to move on for the agenda and talk about industry and market analysis and trends. Really, what's going on in the marketplace, right, from a best practice standpoint, right? There's different types of regions out there. What are those regions doing? What are they focusing on, right? What are the practices they think are the most sustainable for the future and that have been proven in the past, right? Where do they see this subcategory going over the next 3 to 5 years, right? What are the experts talking about with this, right? So it's going to determine what you should focus on. Like I talked about before with digital and training, that's kind of the wave of the future, right? From an artificial intelligence, big data, robotics in reporting, right? That's where a lot of this is headed, right? So whatever you can make mobile at that point from a digital tool standpoint, when you have the right reporting in place on the analytics, right, that that if you have that data in place and it's consolidated from a reporting standpoint, it's easier to make decisions in the future because you know what's going on from a volume standpoint. You know where your strengths and weaknesses are. Staying on the fleet management trend piece, take a look at those KPIs, right? Vehicle ordering, operational reporting, service and maintenance repair. This is going to help you put together your agreement, right? These are the components that are going to go in your agreement that you're going to be able to measure, right, and enforce with the supplier, right? So you need to have, from a trend standpoint, you need to know what's going on in the market, so you're going to incorporate those KPIs into your agreements. Who are the top global providers, like we talked about, right? Who are the ones that are out there? Are they willing to work with you, like I said, from a volume standpoint, yes or no? Taking a look at more trends, how can HR and procurement teams best collaborate to unlock their combined value, right? When it comes to that, I'm just going to focus on these two right here. Speak the same language and trust and value. If you can educate yourself from a procurement standpoint on the HR category, come there with trends, produce presentations to show what's going on in the marketplace, show that you've got some industry knowledge, it's going to go a long way because you're not viewed as an outsider. You're looked at as someone that's almost a peer. From a trust and value expertise standpoint, HR needs to trust you to know that you're not going to go behind their back and do RFPs and negotiate contracts, and right, that you're going to be working lock and step with them on everything, and the communication flow is clear and constant, right? So these are some of the ways that procurement can collaborate better to make sure that the relationship's better, which means you should get more savings because you're going to get more business continuity that way. Taking a look at another piece here, bring services purchasing expertise to the table. You need to basically show them that, hey, we're not going to be an obstacle in the process. Purchasing is going to be here to facilitate the process. We're going to alleviate time and effort and resources and money from your standpoint, right? We're going to be here to make sure that the process is done with due diligence. We're not going to get sued for anything. We're considered a third party in a way, so we've got an arm's length relationship from the supplier, and we're not close to it like you are, so there's not going to be construed favoritism in any way, right? So it also, sometimes by procurement picking up the phone and calling a supplier, that alone rattles the cage enough to get savings or get a better deal because they know they can't deal directly with the business, right? So that presence and expertise is important. Some of the top 5 trends are out there. Not going to walk through these too much, but basically understanding that millennials are no longer the newbies. As the millennials are getting older and they're getting more experience now, they're coming in at higher salaries. They've got superior technical skills coming in, and analytical skills, and they're a lot of them are really dedicated to moving up in the company from the beginning. Culture and ethics get a much needed refresh. Talking about culture and ethics now, it's something that is a major focus on companies to the point where it is in a lot of companies' mission statements, right? Because companies want to make sure that it is a primary focus for their employees on making sure they have the right culture there to not only hire employees and attract them, but to maintain them. Well, some have second thoughts about ditching annual performance reviews. Companies don't want to do that because without that, it's tough for them to understand how employees are doing in competition with other employees. What's the benchmark then? How are you going to judge someone's performance, right? So it's something to keep in mind. These are some trends that are out there. The other thing I wanted to talk about here was number 5, teams evolve to accommodate contingent workers. Basically, a lot of companies are bringing in these freelancers, interns, contractors. You got 20% of that here. Those they don't have to pay those workers benefits, obviously, or bonuses, or raises, or stock. They're saving money from that standpoint. Plus, they're easy to terminate and move on from. Sometimes the issue with that is their rates are very escalated, and they might be working a certain amount of hours that you weren't aware of, and you get hit with bills at the end of the month. So it's something you have to keep a close eye on, but it's something that a lot of companies are going to, and 20% is a pretty high number, to replace employee so that they may lay off in order to save money that way and have flexibility. The 5 most innovative global HR resource departments, this kind of gives you an idea of what's going out there. Google, obviously, is pretty progressive with their environment, with their flexibility, having fun in the office. There's other companies out there as well. This one isn't mentioned, but Virgin Atlantic has unlimited vacation days. They're piloting with their top 17 executives right now, and they're basically saying, okay, if you can get someone to cover your work or cover it yourself, you can take off as many days as you want as long as nothing suffers. So they're testing it. They're seeing if it works with their executive level, and then they're trying to cascade that down. But again, that's something that's going to be pretty attractive to employees, I'm sure, but it merits responsibility on their part, right? So the companies are looking at doing different efforts to motivate employees. If they can't do it too much financially, what are some of the other ways they can do that? And that's important, right, as far as having that sustainability with employees. You don't want to be like Amazon, where typical turnover rate is a year. Is 1 year for employees, right? You want to try, even though they're very successful, you want to try to get away from that and keep people around. And here's some other examples as well. The Nissan example is basically the key philosophy of empowering the workforce to continually improve the way the job is done. So it's empowerment, right? With Nissan, it's basically saying, you don't have to wait for 5 levels of approval to come up with a good idea and try to implement it, right? We're going to empower you to manage your own career, manage your own job as if it was your own business. Take accountability, responsibility, and try to implement, right, and try to be creative. Twitter is obviously a company that's pretty popular. It promotes that work-life balance in a big way, right? The remote, being able to work remote is pretty prevalent there, showing that flexibility level. And, again, with that empowering employees of over 1,000 employees, even though they've got a startup type feel to it, they want to make sure that, these people stay. They've got the experience with the company. They don't want to have them take that experience and go to a startup competitor, right, and use that against them, especially in the tech world, how sensitive that is. So they want to try to keep employees as long as they can. Now, Porter's 5 Forces is a model that you want to take a look at, right, where it basically outlines some different key components, right? What are your barriers to entry? What are things to prevent you from being successful, as managing this category, moving this category strategically to the next level, saving lots of money, bringing the right suppliers in? What are some of the things that are going to stand in your way? Are there too many policies? Is it the leadership you have there, right? Relocation, bargaining power of buyers. Does that matter what location you're in? Are you able to still have the same impact if you're not where the core business is? Right? These are some things to take a look at as you're going through your strategy on where some of your focus areas should be and what are some of the risks, right, and some of the issues that you have to overcome. Moving on to category strategic options. Taking a look at your options, right, you want to take a look at, again, what your focus areas are, right, as far as your insights, right? What's going on? If you take a look at that top left quadrant, cost savings opportunities, right? In the involvement of the buyer, from a cost savings opportunity. As the involvement of the buyer goes up, right, the cost savings opportunity goes down. As the involvement on some of them, right, you can take a look at the different keys. If you got in-house, right, let's take a look at the first one. You got the red star, you've got a low cost savings opportunity, right, and a high involvement of the buyer. Well, because it's in-house, at that point, you're not going to save much, right? There's not much of an impact you can have. From a single source standpoint, all right, there's a little more cost savings opportunity, and there's a little less involvement of the buyer. But again, you're not really having that big of an impact because it's single source, right? If you get into managed service providers and multiple suppliers, well, now you've got a lot more cost savings opportunities going on, and there's a little less involvement even from the buyer because a lot of these types of processes and tools are self-run. You know, and once you put it into the Ariba tool for an RFP, there's really not much to do. There's really not much involvement. You're just facilitating that process. So because of that, it's less effort, more savings opportunity, right? And the same holds true for achievement and risk down below, but that just gives you an example. Some of the pros and cons of strategic options, you know, we talked about single sourcing, just to go back to that. Well, obviously, there's less of a risk because you've already had them in place. You're just renewing the contract, and they're already used to working with the departments in the company. From a cons, of course, there's less cost savings, right? There's not the heightened awareness of, oh, wait a minute, our business is not secure. We're bidding against other suppliers now. You know, you need to come back and sharpen our pencils and have better pricing, give better services or increase services. There's no incentive for these companies to do that because you're just renegotiating their contract, right? Taking a look at bundled sourcing, there's more time required to identify the players that can provide the best quality service for each business division, right? What are the best fit? Who's the best fit for each region, this business unit, and why? Right? Guaranteed high quality of work for those services and fewer number of supplier contracts. If you're bundling your sourcing, like I said, you're trying to get into that 80-20 piece and you're trying to funnel your volume with that small percentage of suppliers, right? You have less overhead in the administration of these suppliers. Well, if you don't have 10,000 suppliers and you've got 100, there's less people needed to manage those suppliers, right? It's common sense. So moving on to your category strategy, you also want to have this outline, right? You can tell from an effort standpoint and from the beginning standpoint, it's stay as it is. It's a comfort approach, right? You're trying to get into the contract. You're trying to penetrate. Procurement hasn't been involved enough. Now there's a sourcing approach, right? Regional equals multi-vendor approach. Global vendors have capacity to meet the changing demands, and best practices can be incorporated into the strategy. Then you've got the consolidated supplier approach, which is that healthy mix of large and medium suppliers. Large suppliers could bring in the trends, and the medium-sized suppliers could be more negotiable on a price and refine basis. So basically saying you start as a comfort approach, and then as time progresses and you build those relationships with the business, you know, you start progressing towards full procurement engagement at this point. What's your 3-year plan look like? Right? Are you going to start off with your sourcing optimization? What's your target? Target could be getting involved, meeting with the executive leadership, right? Trying to get the low-hanging fruit, take care of the quick hits, and build advocacy, right? Say, hey, we just executed this project. We saved a lot of money. We can help out in other areas, right? Start building advocacy, supporting yourself, and selling your case. What are the risks? Well, there might not be a lot of engagement, but we might get better payment terms and compliance and audit, right? So you start off that way, then you move into innovation. How can we add systems and tools in place to make it better, right? And how can we add innovation into the tool? Better payment terms, we know that already, and ensuring compliant audit documentation. These benefits, as you can see, stay static throughout the different phases because this is where you want to get to, and this is the how you're going to get there. Again, you want to source and resource certain categories. Reestablish supplier pool, introduce SRM and selected suppliers, introduce consultancy support. Maybe you don't do it in year one, but in year two, after you build up the relationship, you bring it in. And there's the benchmark. Well, how did we do? How did this work out? Let's reevaluate. Let's see, did those consultants really add value? Did they really help us save money? Did all this innovation really help us reduce headcount? Right? What did it do? How did it help out the organization? Now, you also want to have who are your key players, right? When it comes to these large projects, from the project charters and the strategy, who's your sponsor? Who's the highest executive level in HR that reports right up to the CEO, right? You want to have that person identified. Who's the executive core team? Who are under the EVP, who are the VPs, right? Or the associate VPs that are underneath that. Then the support team could be directors, managers, who's in there. And key holders could still be managers and directors, but it could even be lower levels. But who are the people you're working with? The key stakeholders are more of a day-to-day basis. The flatter organization you have, the more chance the key stakeholders have of being the senior director level, right? So understand who you're communicating to and the roles that they play within the different projects. And just from an appendix standpoint, I had some different examples of, as part of the overall HR project, identify, hey, here are the categories that we know, we talked about these today, that you're going to focus on. They're going to give us the most savings, right? From a consumption standpoint, we want to see if we can save a lot of money or save X amount of dollars from a target standpoint from a competitive bid. What are the requirements from specifications for Ariba? You have to build your requirements documents, right, for your RFPs that they can bid on. So what should be in those requirements? If you don't know and you can't get the right information, do you hire an outside consultant to help you with that, like we said? Price, doing the same for less. Consolidate the tail spend, like we said, with the large suppliers. What are you going to do to increase savings and reduce price and get those large volume discounts? How are you going to consolidate that volume, right? Are there contracts you can get out of that you're not obligated to, right, over a period of time where you can take that spend and recirculate it? And lastly, talking about the value cost risk model, right? And I have it as appendix, but you could have it within your strategy as well. But here are the three main buckets that the focus on. Your value, right? Again, preferred supplier pool, right? Making sure your negotiation with suppliers on large contracts, like we talked about. Cost reduction. Savings off budget is the easiest way to manage savings and account for it. Budgeted $100,000, the project for 90, you save 10. It's real easy to sell that to finance. Consolidate your suppliers, like we talked about. That'll give you that increased cost reduction. Risks, global procurement policies adherence. You might have a policy out there, but is it communicated properly? How is it being enforced to make sure people don't break the policy, right? That's a risk. Early procurement involvement is always a risk. You don't want to be rubber stamping projects and saying, oh, we were involved. We'll sign a no bid form, or, we'll sign off that we were involved, but you really weren't. You came in at the last minute, talked about the contract a little bit, but all the terms were already negotiated, right? So the earlier you can get in on a project, the better, the more impact you're going to have. And that's my wrap up there, Cassie.